College and coming to you, however, not from Iowa, but from Mount Airy, Philadelphia. And here with distinguished filmmakers from our fantastic shorts. Tonight, I'm going to introduce them in order of their films. So for the film Broken Bird, we have Rachel Harrison Gordon. She graduated from University of Pennsylvania, the School of Engineering, where she studied mechanical engineering. After a few years working as a data analyst, working with the New York Times, serving as a presidential innovation fellow for the Obama administration, she goes back to school to get a dual degree, MFA and MBA at NYU, studying filmmaking and business. For our film Commandment 613, we have Miriam Lewin. She was producer and director, got her start working at the Opera Company of Philadelphia, where she helped produce the company's first telecasts. She has made documentary shorts on a number of topics: housing discrimination, kinder transport, the Yale Glee Club. Miriam has also written and produced radio programs, classical music, and on hosted by violinist Itzhak Perlman. Randi Jakini is the principal camera and editor of Commandment 613. She grew up in Bala Cynwyd, and her interest in spiritual topics began well before her bat mitzvah at Beth David in Gladwin. Her documentaries include Scrambled, Trail of Feathers, and she is pursuing a master's degree in preservation and presentation of the moving image at the University of Amsterdam, and doing research through the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision. For our film Stew, we have Jonathan Gruber. He is a distinguished director and producer, head of the studio Black Eye Production. He has produced or directed more than a dozen films. You might have seen some of them. Follow Me, the Yoni Netanyahu story, Jewish Soldiers in Blue and Gray, about Jews in the Civil War, and I guess upcoming Upheaval, the journey of Menachem Begin, which maybe we can get a sense of if it's out yet or it's coming or whatnot. But first, I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you all for being here. Your films are fantastic, and it was so great to see them, and it's truly a blessing what you guys have brought in to our festival.
Thank you.
So, yeah, no problem. So, Rachel, tell us a little bit about how this came about, and tell our audience how this film sort of maps onto your own history.
Sure. It's definitely an autobiographical story, and as you can hear from my background, filmmaking wasn't the first path that I chose in life, and through other experiences in the workplace I found that studying people's behavior, but not quite in the role that was making my heart sing. It was a lot of quantitative analysis and making kind of charts and graphs and white papers about the choices people make. And I always felt more interested in the psychology and background of people. So I kind of took a break from that path of my life and found this really cool film program that asked me to make a short film. And I had some other stories in mind, but what came out fastest on paper was just my experience going through the process of studying for my the trying to incorporate my father into my life, which at that point he was pretty much absent. I grew up in a town with my white mom, and it was pretty much homogenous around me. And so I definitely have, even recently, really come into this idea to face my Blackness and all of these different facets of my identity. And I think that's what's really cool about film and art, is how it creates empathy, how you can deal with this more nuanced gray area, because not everything's black and white. And I'm just really excited to be here, included in this group of other really fascinating stories to show the spectrum of what being Jewish could look and feel like.
Miriam, Randi, What a lovely little film. And I think I hope I get a chance to use it in my classroom at some point in my Jewish studies courses. So please tell us a bit about how you found your subject and how you came to do this together.
Well, how we found our subject, I've known Kevin Hale for a long time, and I've made a lot of films for clients. I'm sorry, I have an echo here, so it's a little confusing to me if I'm trying to talk through it. And when he told me about the project, what his work with the Memorial Scrolls Trust, Torahs, I just said, that sounds like a film. So it was the first time that I launched onto making a film without a client and a budget. And Randi and I had done several projects together, and we were kind of looking for something new. And she said, yeah. And I want to say thank you, Randi, for staying up, because she is in Amsterdam and it's 2 a.m.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here, and I'm so glad we got to make this film together. Yes, I don't know if I have anything else to say, and it's late.
Well, we should at least tell us how Amsterdam is right now.
Oh, interesting. Amsterdam will come
Jonathan,
out of this. Sorry, Amsterdam has been in a pretty heavy lockdown, but comes out of it tomorrow, and the International Documentary Film Festival will start and have in-person screenings, which is pretty interesting after yes, that period. But I think we have a lag, so I'm going to send this back to you.
Great. Before we get to Jonathan, let me just make sure that you out there who are watching this know that you should ask a question, make a comment in the chat. You can ask a question on the bottom button. It says ask a question. Put your comment or question in, and we will create a stack, and we will get to it before this session is over. Jonathan, it looks like you have made a film with a whole bunch of Democratic luminaries to make us all feel very unaccomplished by attending to the life of Stu. How did you get this project? Did you know about Stu before this? And it's great to bring him into our attention.
Sure. Yeah, Stu is a pretty remarkable guy who's been behind the scenes, sort of this, I don't know, to say Washington insider isn't really correct, because that has sort of a skeevy feeling to it, but he's just been doing remarkable work since the Carter administration. And living outside of Washington, D.C., you're just exposed to all sorts of people. Actually, we attend the same synagogue, and someone asked me a number of years ago if I would do a film about his wife for his 65th, and so I did that. And then his kids came to me and said, we want to do a film about Stu for his 75th, and I said, well, that's great, but we're not really going to do a happy birthday video. We really need to do a doc on him. And to their credit, they said sure. And I just asked for all these people, President Carter, President Clinton, who he had served in positions under, and Vice President Biden and Mondale and Vice President Gore, and Secretary Albright is really as you said, a who's who in the Democratic world. So it was really an honor to meet people, and each one of those people that I met has, their memories there. Some amazing, some neutral, some, more interesting. And it was great, to be able to show it here at festivals. So to really let people see what Stu has done, really for the world and the Jewish people in Israel.
Well, I was glad to find out after the film was over. I Googled him and said, oh, he's still alive, which I was delighted to find out. A few quick questions, and then we'll go back on the round. So are his sons in DC? What do they do? And let me do ask this, if you could throw this into your answer. Was Stu modern Orthodox the whole time, or did he become modern Orthodox at some point?
I'm not sure how effectively I can answer that second part of the question. The synagogue, we're I don't know if this is typical of Jews, but we're members of multiple synagogues, and so the one that he goes to and that we're members of is a conservative one. It's called Or Kodesh in Chevy Chase, Maryland. So I'm not sure. I think they were always traditional. His kids, one is local, one is in New York, and they just love their dad, and so they really wanted to honor him. So it was again a great experience, and I wanted to make it without compromises, and they went for it, and was just to learn about him and all the things that he did. One thing that didn't even make it into the film was a story about Iranian Jews after the revolution in '79, that he was able to convince President Carter that Iranian Jews that were here and Iranian Jews that were trying to get out, 50,000 of them were able to come to the US. And the way that it worked was that, I guess it was controversial, to have all these people come in potentially. And so the way it was written was that if the Shah ever came back into power, they would go back. So clearly that didn't happen, and they all stayed. And in the Iranian or the Farsi Jewish community, he's really revered.
Well, these films gave us at least 3 people to love, some real, some fiction. Rachel, I hear rumors that you're trying to expand this into a longer film. Could you tell us a little bit about what you left on the cutting room floor, or maybe what you had planned for the longer version?
Totally. The rumors are true, which is still funny to me that anyone outside my little bubble knows anything about me right now. But yeah, I think the hardest part of getting this to its short form was feeling like I was respecting the father's story. It's autobiographical, protective of both my parents, and I think the original story had a lot of both of their lives, both of their backstories, and it was getting a little convoluted in such a short period of time. I don't think the audience would have understood exactly what I was trying to say by explaining and adding all these other dimensions. So I was really eager to get to revisit particularly my father's life and his perspective of this whole process, which his upbringing, he wasn't Jewish, but he went through, I think, a very analogous process of being led a path that he didn't quite identify with, and then coming to find ways to incorporate himself into that process. And so the feature, you see both the father and the daughter growing up in parallel, and see how much they need each other and how similar they are. And I'm hoping to be touching. I'm kind of going through some iterations of it in labs, and we're getting there. But yeah, I'm excited, hopefully, to work with many of the same people too, cast and crew. And when COVID, I guess, settles down a little bit, reuniting with this film family that I really do cherish so much.
I think I've played the final song. Is her name Amira Leon? I think I've played that like 20 times.
She wrote that. I mean, she is just an amazing artist, and I think every kind of medium. She sings and she paints and she does sculpture and is a total icon for me, and is also biracial. And so we definitely connected immediately over that. And she actually sang at my wedding, which was really cool. But I asked her if she would write something for this. And this is really, we were on set still, and I'm like, okay, I think we're gonna need something from her. And she was like, okay, well, just tell me like what it's about. And so maybe a couple days after we went home, I already had this track that was perfect. I had many places I thought I could put it, and really helps the film end on a tone of optimism. I think there's the risk that you feel a little let down by the circumstances of how the film ends, but it definitely is a story about resiliency. And so I think that that's the message she's sending, and that Birdie is, going higher. She can achieve anything. So very grateful.
One last question. So could you tell us a little bit about the Torah portion and significance to the entire narrative in that 10 minutes?
Yes, that Torah portion we select. Actually, I was talking to my cantor after we had, made all of the final decisions about it, and I don't think anyone would be assigned that because it would be performed on Yom Kippur, but that's okay. I think the story it's telling is about making a vow, what it means to your family to uphold that and to keep your word. And that was the whole thread of the film for us, of can you still love somebody if they let you down, if they betray you? Are they still able to fulfill their promise in unexpected? Your interpretation of perhaps the script becomes so literal that you couldn't see that they were fulfilling their promise. And how do you atone for that? How do you make up to somebody when you fail them? And so I thought that was fitting and fun to kind of revisit my Torah reading days, where my cantor would give me this tape and I would just listen to it. I'll say as much as I can, but I could have listened to it more. And just understanding the roots of what I was saying. I actually, a lot of Hebrew school, I felt isolated and just disconnected from Judaism. And that was the first time I really felt like I was connecting with something. And I think it was because my own Torah portion was also kind of similar to hers in that it was about a scapegoat and where you place blame. And so I thought there was this I was like, is this intentional that you're making me go through this psychoanalysis of how I deal with guilt and blame? But yeah, I was really grateful to really understand the words of what we chant so often and really identify with what was happening.
So to transition to Commandment 613, so like, or 613, 316. Wait, what number are we at? So Rachel, I read somewhere that you were influenced a little bit by a serious man. There's a bar mitzvah scene in there. And I don't know if you all know this, but in that bar mitzvah scene, one of the extras is tasked to lift the Torah, and he doesn't realize how awkward and heavy it is, as everybody knows who's held up a Torah. And he said, Jesus Christ. And the Cohen brothers were so amused at that they left it in, but it was a kind of a blooper. But of course, everyone's afraid it's going to tear, which brings us to the question of Torah scrolls and repair. And it was great to see familiar faces, Philadelphia area faces in the audience there in the synagogue, as Kevin sort of, how would we say it, re-sanctifies the Torah scroll. But Kevin's life must be one of like a kind of a monastic life of focus and concentration. I got nervous just watching him work. But let me ask a more pedestrian question to you two, and that is how you finished this before COVID hit. How was the you didn't? How has the reception been?
Can't hear you, Miriam.
Okay. We actually finished it during COVID. We'd been working on it for quite a while, but finished the editing during COVID and did the finishing. Yeah.
And how has it been received since it's now out?
Well, it's been received very well. We've been distributing it mainly through online screenings, virtual events for synagogues, mostly synagogues that have one of these scrolls. There are 1,000 of them in the United States. And so we do a screening and a Q&A with Randi, if she can make it, and me and Rabbi Hale. And people are so interested in the the minutia of what Rabbi Hale does, and also the sacredness of what he does. So it's been a very encouraging reaction. Eventually we'll
And
do
also,
educational distribution also.
and also just, I found it a really nice way during COVID to connect with folks. So in different synagogues who, you know, themselves are really coming together in their community and letting us in and sharing their warmth and their curiosity. And it's been really nice, actually, way to see that film in this medium, you know, can really bring people together across the world and make new opportunities during this time. It's been really interesting.
It's such a great film because it brings so many familiar elements and unfamiliar elements together. I think this is going to be a great teaching tool for we who are in Jewish studies and religious studies to talk about the craft of creating or repairing Torah, but also the congregation and their dedication and joy and the sacredness to connecting it to lost communities from Europe. So it is a blessing that what you two brought into the filmosphere for those purposes.
Thank you.
Let me turn to Stu here. Jonathan, the question that everybody wants to know is, what's Biden like as a subject of a film, which you got a chance to film him? So we want to hear spill some tea. Tell us about these Democratic luminaries who are heroes to so many of us.
Sure. Well, Joe Biden has great teeth. He's just pearly whites. That was what I remember most about him. But no, he shared. It was just interesting. He really was pretty straightforward about things. We spoke to him for about a half an hour. He seemed very at ease with himself, with talking about Stu and their relationship over the years. Talking about his lack of sense of humor. He didn't hold back. I think of all the people that I interviewed, the one that I have the most memorable was President Clinton, in that we interviewed him in Boston. He was about to speak at a conference, and so we were behind the stage. And my daughter and my son, I said, you know, every president and vice president I interview, I'll try to get an autograph. So so the night before the interview with Clinton, my daughter wrote a nice little letter to him and also to Hillary, saying how, you know, she was sorry that they were getting such a hard time about lots of things, and but that she was inspired by them. And so at the end of the interview, I mean, the Secret Service is all waiting to pounce and move him along, and I had my letter there, and I was gonna, you know, make sure I gave it to him. So the second it's over, I give it to him, and there's just this chaos all around. It's like he has to be hustled off everywhere, and he's just sitting down and reading the letter that my 13-year-old daughter wrote, and he's just like, oh, this is so nice, this is so sweet. And he just took his time and was just writing, and he stopped and paused. He was in no rush to do anything, and then he just left. And but that was really very memorable for me. President Carter, of course. I mean, what an honor to interview President Carter and Rosalind. We went down to Atlanta. There was an ice storm, so we couldn't do it for a day or two. And just, you know, remarkably cogent, you know, at his age. Trying to think of what other place. We went to Israel. We were in Nashville. We were all over the place. So those are some of the. Secretary Albright, she was wonderful. We interviewed her the day of the solar eclipse. Just sort of interesting memories about these things. But they all have been impacted by Stu. That's sort of the thread. You know, they're just so impressed with his dedication as a public servant. And I think, you know, in the times that we're in now, I think public service has gotten a not a bad rap, but it's been mutated a little bit. And so to have someone who's behind the scenes and doing great work, and still doing great work in terms of Holocaust reparations, it's wonderful to be able to profile someone like that.
I was so impressed. I ordered his book on the future of Jews to add to the collection, and I'm sad to say it hasn't come yet. But I'm looking forward to sort of learning from him, from all that distilled wisdom which the film shows. I mean, people talk about Washington being a swamp. They don't realize it's held together by these Lamed Vavniks who know so much about the world and have such a great work ethic and are so committed to public service. And I think in these times, which have so devalued public service and devalued what goes on in Washington, it was really a wonderful light on that. And I hope that your film gets used to sort of illustrate what excellence looks like in government. And it was great that you had some Republicans in there too, David Gergen, I recall, and a few others who had high things to say about Stu.
That's right, and this came from Stu is from Atlanta, and so growing up in the 50s, 60s, he saw segregation. He saw all sorts of things that made him question, what was right and what was wrong, and that turned him into someone who really wanted to fight for people who were not being served in the South and in this country, starting with President Johnson. And there's I don't know, being from the North, being from New York, I don't have much of a connection with the Jews from the South. I did the Civil War Jewish soldiers in blue and gray. So it's nice to see these values across the country, no matter where people are, and fighting for what's right.
Before we go around again, let me just ask you, what's the status of the Menachem Begin documentary?
It's done. It premiered at the Heartland Film Festival in Indianapolis in October. We also were fortunate to have all of our production done in January. So we were working on this remotely during COVID. And there are some other festivals next year. We're waiting to figure out exactly where it's going. But we're excited about it. There's never been a feature doc on Menachem Begin, remarkably in English. And so he's an interesting guy. That's a whole nother topic. But also someone who really had a moral center, I think. And as someone in the film said, whether you loved him or hated him, you couldn't say he was a hypocrite. And so I think that, standing for your values is something to be said. And, instead of going back and forth, whichever way the political winds blow.
Yeah, I also heard he was quite a gentleman. And it was a time when, I guess, political far-rightists could also be cordial and interpersonally demand respect from the opposition. So unlike some of right-wing politicians today, but maybe we should move on.
We keep alluding to these things, so I'm happy to move on.
We are nonpartisan here at the film festival.
Sure, we love everyone.
As we should, because all are capable of teshuvah. Rachel, I love how before we go to Rachel, audience, ask some questions, make some comments. We will answer them down below in the Ask a Question button or on the chat. Rachel, I loved how the radio is playing different music, and so we find the mother is playing Terry Gross, and I go, oh great, a Philadelphia film. And then I had to remind myself that Terry Gross is a national treasure, although she is from Philadelphia. And so that was a clever thing. And I was struck by the mother touching her hair, which is on campus is a no-no. It's seen as a major microaggression to touch hair unasked, uninvited, especially hair of people of color, women of color especially. So was that purposeful, or is that some echo of a just a childhood annoyance of annoying parents?
Oh my gosh, I guess like one and the same, but both of what you commented on, I love those details. I think music and just background sounds, I was always paying a lot of attention to how to find the worlds that I was entering. It's funny, we played this film in Berlin, and two women from Philly were there and came down after the Q&A, and they're like, it was such a nice reminder of home to hear her voice. And I think the clip we actually chose, she says, like, if recording from Philadelphia, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's, making the connection. But I loved using music as a way to show kind of the lack of musicality that was with her mom, and how her dad was injecting this into her, and how she, like, a private moment for her, and then she could actually sing and use her voice at her bat mitzvah, which for me, I was, and still am, very hesitant to sing out loud. And if I'm caught singing in my headphones, I'm pretty mortified. But I remember feeling kind of liberated during my bat mitzvah that I had to sing and had to use my, chanting's a little bit different, but you could still make it sound lovely. And some people do, and I did my best. But with the hair, yeah, I didn't want the mom to seem like a total ignorant woman, but I think that in that moment, it's really coming from love. I think no better, but it's so stunned by how mature and beautiful her daughter looks that she just wants to be close to her, but she still kind of, violates that super hardcore rule of just respecting the mane, which my mom and I have now, that she's so well versed about how the weather affected my hair, how just sleeping patterns would do. So she's, she prides herself on being an expert. But yeah, that was definitely on purpose.
Sorry, something getting in the way of me turning on the microphone. How else has it been received? Has it played a number of festivals?
It's played in a couple of places, and I mentioned Berlin because I also felt that this was a super American story, that my husband is Israeli, and so just the concept of a bat mitzvah is super different. The way that she chants Hebrew, they like made them crack up. I'm like, why are you laughing? But just understanding that the story has universal elements to it was really rewarding. It's my film, and I chose something very close to my own life that in school, there's a little bit of a stigma against writing about yourself. They're like, are you not creative enough to create something from scratch? And I felt it was hard to validate my own life experience in that setting, but the comments from women who were Black that saw themselves in this film, people with divorced parents who were like, oh, I remember being herded from like one household to another, but just people that looked like me and didn't, both had ways to connect to the story, which made me feel, which was gratifying, and just a reminder of movies is to connect with people. It's how I found the field in the first place, is I was just consuming so much of it that one day I said I should just professionalize this interest of mine and go for it. So it's been really wonderful to share it with other people.
The more and more, I've been teaching a class called Race and Judaism for about 15 years now, and I'm always looking for great items to show for my students about Jews of color in the United States, also in Israel. And I think this will be a really great tool, a great topic of conversation for my students to start, but not just confined to courses on race, but also just Judaism 101 that can teach viewers about the lived experience of a kind of slice of American Judaica today. And I think this would be really useful film. So I'm using all your films, folks. I'm going to be showing them all over.
Well, actually, if I can add one more thing that makes me think of, I belong to a conservative temple that's Ashkenazi, and I didn't even know that Sephardic people existed. And some of the audiences saw the scene at the end of the character dancing barefoot on the bima, and they were like, oh my gosh, that's sacrilegious. How could you even think to do that? And I had my reasons, partly that her shoes were really uncomfortable and they were just off at that moment. But we came up with a reason to do it on purpose, about reclaiming the space, whatever. But then I went to a Sephardic student organization from my school and was educated about a custom where you actually feel closer to the earth and closer to the text when you remove your shoes and go through this process. And I just, once again, I was reassured by the kind of diverse experiences that one could have with Judaism. So yeah, I would love to be educated way more about this life that we've been living, but the potential is endless. So very cool stuff.
Striking a blow against Ashkenazi normativity, as we say. Very good. That's a great tidbit. So talking about the restoration of Torah and the sort of demonstration of how central Torah as a physical object is to Jewish life. How has that been received? Has the film been, have you gotten any sort of feedback from small audiences, individuals, about maybe comparative practices within Judaism?
One thing, Miriam, I thought was really interesting in our last synagogue meeting was how after watching the film, people started asking questions about the Torah that they have. So a lot of people don't know where they come from, you know, how long has their community had it. A lot of people have had these memorial scrolls and didn't know it. So it seems like it's also opened up for communities to really investigate, you know, what's the history there. And I think there's a lot of space there for discussion and exploration and learning. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people
Miriam?
don't have a chance to get close to a Torah. Can you hear me? I am having more mic problems. I'm trying to, can you hear me now? I was saying that a lot of people just never get a chance to get close to a Torah. And this is a way for them to get close up. And I hope it'll spark their interest in maybe learning to chant, learning to care for it. I'll also say, and actually I'm going to let Randi say this because my echo is so bad, the different levels that we were trying to portray in this film, both the representations of Torah.
Sorry, tell me what, looking at Torah from the Memorial Scrolls Trust level and also from Kevin's experience, right? So I was very interested in and moved by what Kevin shared with us about his own spiritual path, going from, you know, being really disconnected to becoming a rabbi and a scribe, and his sort of exploration of spirituality and ideas about God. And so I think, you know, we worked to find the balance between that story and then the story of the Memorial Scrolls, and also telling the story of the craft itself and this idea of sacred craft, which, you know, Kevin really taught me about. I learned so much from him about what that sacred craft means, and I'll just add one thing that for me it was so important that this film really reached people who are not Jewish, that it, you know, as well as people who are Jewish, but that it explained, you know, the ideas in a way that would be accessible to people. And I hope it did that. Miriam, did I get all the levels?
Yeah, and your comment about it reaching people who aren't Jewish, it's also been reaching people who are Jewish in a fairly secular way. I hear from friends who have no synagogue affiliation, have no synagogue experience, but are culturally Jewish or historically Jewish or ethically Jewish. And they tell me how moved they are by this. It's like it's opened something up for them, which is not something I expected.
That's great. A quick question. Were Kevin, I assume he's not Orthodox, are there rules about filming a sofer at work that perhaps, because I think he has a Reconstructionist kippah on, but I don't know what denomination he is. Was there a way in which that your access to him was different than if he was an Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox sofer?
I don't know how different it would have been with an Orthodox sofer. He was very open to us. We didn't film on Shabbat. We tried to be respectful of his tools and his studio, but I know for him it was a little unnerving when I kept saying to Randi, get closer, because Randi is the principal camera woman in addition to the editor. So she was like, 6 inches from the parchment, and he was a little concerned that that camera was going to fall on the parchment.
I think it's an interesting question. One would have to ask, folks from different strands of Judaism, what would be their thoughts on this. So it was certainly nothing that came up, with Kevin. And I would say about Kevin, I think he belongs to a couple of different denominations, and I appreciate that a lot. Yeah.
I think the question would be, what about capturing God's name on the digital files, and can you ever delete them? What do you do with it?
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
that's a great question.
That gets back to the film about the Cairo Geniza. What do we do with that footage, Randi, that has God's name in it?
And also as an archivist.
We never did film him writing the name of God, because as he explained to us, but it's not a film, on the days when he's going to write the name of God, he goes to a mikveh first, which in his case is a river nearby. He takes a swim. He saves up all the instances of writing God's name, so they're blanks in his parchment, and he does them all in one day with his special quill. So we never actually saw that.
Jonathan, we're going to turn to you. We're going to go for another few minutes here. I want to ask you a little bit about maybe what got left on the cutting room floor that will be in the DVD deleted scenes.
Oh, there's so much. I tend to do long interviews. It's a good question. I mean, I mentioned the one about Iranian Jews. I guess what we didn't really talk about so much, we did a little bit, was about his relationship with his wife, Fran, who unfortunately passed away a number of years ago, but just sort of the dedication that he had to her, just a wonderful husband. And when she was sick, and it was over a period of a number of years, how it was after public service. I mean, even while he's doing, the Holocaust restitution projects, which, if people don't know, he's really he's the chief negotiator, and he's been from looted art to Swiss bank accounts to slave labor. He continues even today, to be that chief negotiator. But also he's a lawyer now. He's a private attorney, and obviously working very hard. But he essentially put his work on hold, or was working from the hospital, and really remarkable his dedication to his wife. So that's, I think, one thing that maybe we briefly covered it, but I think that had I wanted to extend it a little bit more, I probably would have.
What, now that the Menachem Begin film is done, what are you setting your sights on next?
I have a couple of small projects that I through my company, but sort of my Moby Dick that I've been working on for far too long is a film about IG Farben, which some may or may not know is a German corporation that was brought up on trial. At least the executives were brought up on trial at Nuremberg, broken up into companies people definitely know today, which is BASF and AGFA and Herbst and Bayer. And that's part of the story. It's about one person who is an executive there named Otto Ambros, and Otto is the A in sarin gas, which was invented by the Nazis as an insecticide. So the film is called The Godfather of Sarin, and it sort of talks about the history of sarin, the history of IG Farben, and the history of Otto Ambros. And coming soon, any decade, to a theater near you.
That sounds like a great project. We hope to see it soon, and we hope to see projects from all of you guys, because what lovely films for this festival. Miriam seems to be in the Phantom Zone, but as we're coming on time here, maybe she'll come on during this section. So I just want to thank everyone for being here. It was so lovely to hear your stories and to especially to watch your art, and looking forward to all these projects, your next projects. Randi, you and Miriam, are you planning a reunion, a team up again for another project?
We don't have anything in the works at the moment. Have to wait until I can fly back to the States. But we always really enjoy working together. So I hope we'll be able to work on something together. I'm currently studying artificial intelligence and film archives, which I just like to throw out there. And a lot of my thinking about archives is also connected to what I learned from Kevin. So I like these ideas of how we think about the past and the future. Yeah, thank you so much for having us. This has been really fun. And hi to all my Philly people who showed up.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Miriam. I think you're somewhere on our screen, but ghostly, but still here. And everybody who watched these films knows how fantastic they are. And I hope they get a wide audience, both on the festival circuit and also through educators and through synagogues and through politics. Yes, kol kavod. And have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much, Elliot.
Thank you.
Great to see everybody.
Thank you so much.